My 30 years of life, like I felt as though it was an individual's choice, you know. I didn't, at no point did I feel like I was doing anything like remotely like a pattern. I felt like I was just making choices, doing things, and doing it because I wanted to.
Mm.
And it's like,
Yeah.
that was the thing where it's like, oh no, everything was because of something in the past, and that something in the past wasn't resolved, so it just kept looping over. So it's kind of like the code looping until the condition is met. You just keep on going, and then it's like, whoa, everything. Yeah.
Okay, so nothing more patterns today. What kind of patterns today more? You don't remember anything more?
Any what? What do you mean?
In our walk and maybe before?
Oh, I see what you. I see what you're hinting at. I was like, what the fuck is he trying to talk about? So subtle there. In our walk.
Yeah, you were so low as well with the push the abs.
I was like, what is he talking about? Oh yeah, there was one more pattern. Now that you mention it. Dickhead. So, we're back. Day 8. You had an interesting ab exercise today. How did that go for you? If you remember, your abs exercise while you were here.
Oh yeah.
How did that go?
I know what you mean. I was like, abs.
What?
What?
I don't work abs.
Yeah. Yeah, it was funny. So we were doing some abs inside. Actually, you wanted to do it outside.
Yeah, but then I said, let's go inside. It's like,
Yeah. So yeah, we're doing switching up. One does the abs, then the other does. Already did some workout outside, and I was doing my abs, and then I looked into this. Where you can't see it in the camera, but yeah, it's fine. I mean, yeah, I look into this door, like the door here, and it's like this book over there was in here. Like I had spoke about it yesterday. Even what's the potential for in the next 10,000 years for human civilization? Like if people start if they start teaching in school awareness work and start teaching like people to fucking take control of the mind and all that shit and fucking delete the self and everyone just fucking having a blast and just experiencing joy and bliss and love and everyone just like hugging each other and not like treating each other like a separate creature. And it's like it's just a all new other. It's like there's this, I think, Eckhart Tolle. I never read this book, but it's called A New Earth. So that might be his vision. And today, yeah, we were working out, and then I just look into this door, like half closed or half open or whatever you want to call it. And then there's like this book and some others, but yeah, this book from Eckhart Tolle, The New Earth, A New Earth. And yeah, I don't think it was random that this appeared. And yeah, that was funny. And then ended up like spending a lot of the time of today like reading. I'm already halfway through it. And yeah, it's pretty good.
So there is no such thing as my life, and I don't have a life. I am life. I and life are one. It cannot be otherwise. So how could I lose my life? How can I lose something that I don't have in the first place? How can I lose something that I am? It is impossible.
Pretty good book. Like, it's funny that this is referring to a lot of things that we realized before find the book. It's funny. The entanglement.
A different kind of entanglement.
Speaking about the entanglement, which is interesting that we realized that. I didn't know that. I mean, I had an idea that there is spiritual books and probably speak about this stuff, but yeah, was good to kind of read it and kind of remind myself from a lot of things that I kind of knew, but it's always good to remember again, to reinforce to yourself all those things, so it doesn't, like, sometimes the mind might try to like tell you like you're crazy, you're delusional. Like, of course you have a self, what are you talking about? but yeah it's good to have kind of confirmed through books and other people that it's real, it's not just delusion.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. So you mentioned that thing about the entanglement of the self. But yeah, we haven't really spoke too much about the book. So was there any other interesting things or key things within the book that you want to share? Or
So many, but yeah, I was just reading about the pain body, and it's fucking nuts. Like, speaking about like when you were speaking like our relationships are like a fuel for pain body, and that like people usually in the first part of the relationship that looks like heaven, like the initial, like, what's it called, I don't know,
the honeymoon period.
honeymoon, yeah, the honeymoon. And then after, when it starts becoming comfortable and it locks in the relationship, then just like the pain bodies start popping out. And it's nuts. Like, it was referring, like, for example, if like the pain body wants to replenish itself on periodically, so you'll find any situations, any people to kind of re-alive itself, replenish itself. And if it's nobody to do it or no situation, you just do it through your own thoughts and feeds off the energy of thought, negative thoughts.
Okay. Maybe could you like explain what a pain body is for somebody who's not so aware of it? Is it
Pain body, yeah, it's like an amalgam of like emotional pain that you didn't process and dealt from the past, that you just repressed, and then it just makes this angst of this amalgam of pain and suffering that wants to that becomes like a parasite, and it wants to replenish itself through you. And when it takes you, like when people are very unconscious, and it completely overwhelms you and takes you and just does the craziest things, like people, like a lot of men that, for example, beat their wife up, it's because of like they just taken over. And he was referring to like alcohol can be a driver to even make it more, the pain body more stronger. So like it just takes over the person completely. It's to the point that the person is no more, and it's just pain body. And then the person does just like it does, like, that's how people do those crazy evil things. It's just they taken over by this fucking entity, dark energy or some shit. Yeah, it's crazy to see how she narrated how that works, and in a smaller or greater fashion you can see that in almost every relationship. It just feeds, they feed off each other, everyone feeds off each other's pain, and just this loop of creating pain. But yeah, the ego perceives that pain as like pleasure in the short term. It kind of feels like enhanced, but it's always more pain to all beings involved. So it's, yeah, definitely. And it was something interesting that he said people usually attract people that correspond to each other's pain body, that will trigger each other's pain body the most. They are the people that are most attracted to each other. So the kind of like the codependent / a narcissist relation.
It's like the opposite.
Yeah. And they will trigger the shit out of each other, And from one side, it's good because it gives an opportunity for them to awaken through all that pain. On the other side, it can make them more unconscious. More pain, yeah. It's crazy.
That's interesting, and I think like so many relationships just they go on like that, and they just kind of assume that's kind of how they are. It's like, oh, my girlfriend is just like this, or my wife is just like this, and it's just then just never see the actual structure of
Yeah.
it. It's like they just assume that this is what it is, and that's what kind of realization I came to today was I was seeing like more structures in kind of structures and patterns in in things that happen in my life, and then like when you look at the pain body thing, it's like when he writes it in the book, it's not just one incident about one relationship. This is something that goes on time and time again in many relationships throughout human history, and it's like there's so many patterns that are just happening, and we're like majority of people are kind of unaware to them. We just see it as like one isolated incident, and I'm a special person, and I'm the only one going through this. But yeah, it's like that's what I've learned today. It's like there's patterns to it, and it's like when you go deeper into it, you don't see how deep the patterns go. But yeah, it was interesting.
Yeah.
But I think that's maybe something you kind of were aware of for a while, like the patterns in things. You look more deep into patterns instead of isolated incidents. So I'm curious why is that? Like, how were you able to see the pattern so early? In
What? How I see patterns
well, earlier, yeah.
earlier. Well, my like, even getting to the stage of like actually having an initial ego death, like, well, that initial transformation, I had to like learn through pattern recognition and trying to understand how to learn something. I think like that's like a meta skill that a lot of people lack. It's like learning how to learn. Because people don't know how to learn how to learn. Yeah. So they don't know what's the best way to learn because they never learned how to learn. So they learn in a very deficient ways, or not learning at all, just repeating the same stuff, feeling like they learned something. So yeah, that allowed me to kind of, by going through that process based on that kind of patterns that I realized, then I start noticing that those patterns didn't only happen in positive constructing, like, or changing. It happens in every way, in every other ways. And so I started to see it in the way I was doing things, and then eventually start seeing in everybody the way they were behaving was based on those patterns, because patterns are patterns. Doesn't matter if it's too constructive to make a better habit, or it's a pattern that is destructive and it's and out of control and completely coming from unconsciousness, or if it's a conscious pattern that was built to improve something or to learn something. Patterns are patterns. They just make their function in the system that is the human. They just propel themselves, not in the sense they're good or bad. They're just patterns. But yeah, if you make them completely unconsciously, then it's just random shit that you absorb from environment, people, and shit that you completely unaware of, and just became like a sponge to it, and then became it without even noticing, not even having any kind of awareness around it. And then, of course, the way I did it allowed me completely different awareness of patterns, because I had to apply it consciously to change, instead of just building stuff unconsciously.
Okay. Yeah, that's all right. So, yeah, it's funny, as you found that book, there were a couple of other books around, and I also picked up a book on Stoicism. So I've been reading that today. I just finished it. It was a short book talking about the life of 3 Roman emperors and Stoics. They were kind of philosophers in Stoicism. And I knew a little bit about, like, I've heard the word and I've watched a couple of videos, but I didn't really understand Stoicism before reading this book. But what I've read in there, a lot of the principles of Stoicism, it's quite big in the personal development. It's kind of, to anybody who's into personal development, it's kind of common sense when you read it. But I guess to most people and other people who, back then in the Roman times, when it was written, the book about Marcus Aurelius was written in the 1st century, I think. So back then it was probably like mind-blowing to them. But yeah, it's pretty interesting because when I was reading it, I saw a lot of the things that you told me that you applied in Learning Game actually as the principles of Stoicism. So things like being emotionally indifferent in victory or success. So like not getting too carried away with the victory and not feeling too depressed about this loss, but just taking it as a learning process is like one of the key principles. And also just the idea of kind of not just having an emotional balance, like a baseline of an emotions, not really falling into the emotions too much. So they kind of look at certain emotions like anger, and none of it's kind of from a place of judgment. It's always, these are things that happen and you should be able to control them. So it's looking at, the basic principle is to tell the person that they have the ability to control the outcome. So it's like giving people the power to know that, okay, you can take control. And if somebody who thinks that they can't control things outside of their control, just telling them to focus on what they can control. So it's kind of common sense to most people, but yeah, it's kind of the way that I saw you playing game also in the sense of they tell you to when you have an opportunity to go for an easy route or like a challenging one, like they always pick the challenging one. So in order to learn the most, so they actually tell you you'd rather go for the more challenging route than the easy one.
Yeah, it's funny.
So
it's funny that, yeah, definitely that's what I did. And that's funny because that's exactly the opposite route that most people take.
yeah.
And yeah.
So I was curious because you never like read Stoicism. So where did you learn these kind of ways of thinking about it? And things like when, for example, we always talked about when approaching girls, you gotta predict the negative outcomes and have solutions for it. And that's kind of what they talk about as well. It's like, instead of fearing something negative, it's like assume it will happen and then have a solution for it. Assume every negative outcome and have the solution there. So these kind of things you've always kind of brought into your way of thinking. So where did these ideas come from? Do you know? Is it something you built or watched, or what's your...
I guess it's a combination between watching the right people, having right mentors. In this case, I would take that from R.C. Tyler for sure. From Owen Cook videos and Julian Blanc's videos. That's what I watched most when I started out. But most of it was just like recognizing through the process itself what's the fastest track to learn, like to accomplish something, instead of just having theories and a lot of understanding, but just intellectual understanding from things. It's just like through action itself you can just learn everything you need to the process itself. Of course, having mentors is important, but most of the things you would learn by of action would be way better than listening to any kind of video, because it reveals itself through the process. You just have to be aware of it, or to go through it and learn. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, that's the way that you did it, just to take the action. But I think for some people, they might get stuck in a certain place, and then they keep trying to do something, and maybe they'll see that it doesn't work, but maybe it works 1 in 500 or whatever, and then they won't take that step to like choose the challenging option. Like that's always the struggle. Is like, maybe you know deep down, as somebody who's good at learning, that choosing the most challenging option will make you learn the most. But in this context, maybe the fear or something gets a hold of you, where you just always fall into the same pattern and do the same thing over and over again, which, yeah, something I experienced for sure. But yeah, how is that, like, how is it possible to overcome that kind of, like, get into that plateau and pushing yourself to like keep going?
Well, aligning your priorities. I think knowing what you want is what's your intention. Because if you don't set your intention of what you want consciously, will be set unconsciously. So you end up getting what your unconscious wants to get out of that situation, not what consciously you want, because you didn't set it properly. And then just like, if you're repeating the same stuff, just it comes down to being super humble and willing to go back to the basics and just start by the basic stuff that you struggle the most with, and learn. You don't try to learn everything at once, because most people are doing that. They go out, and then when they go out and they have no idea what they're working on, what they have to improve, they have no clue. They're just going. That's where those unconscious stuff will be just the default outcome. Will be whatever unconscious stuff you have is gonna be the default. It's gonna turn out to be the default, and it's just gonna reinforce more the default. So you have to, become more conscious when taking action, not just mindless action, but actually having a strong focus on what are you doing. I think that was something that I always had throughout every single day of my journey, was like, I knew exactly why I'm doing what I'm doing today, and why is that influencing the big picture. I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm playing the game on another level. Like, I'm not playing for today. I'm doing that thing that I'm doing today, because I know where that's gonna take me in a year or two. So I'm not really concerned about today. Like, I think that's the big thing, is like, once you know how to critically think, like, what you have to work on right now, that will, like, the 80-20 rule that a lot of people talk about in business, but in learning in general, like, applying that rule, like, what's the 20 percentile that will improve me 80% today, right now, and then just do that one, that thing. And then, like, as long as you have that awareness, exactly what's your intention, what do you want to do today, and why is that important to do today, because of whatever your vision, your purpose is, then it becomes easy. It becomes almost intuitive to know, like, what's next. But a lot of people go about it very unconsciously, and they just think, like, if I do enough times, then I'll get good at it. So they're doing it, and they'll never get good. because they're unconscious about it. They have no clue. Like I always tell this, like, to like, and another thing is whenever you are working on that thing today, it's like it's not working on that thing enough. You have to exhaust the shit out of it, you know. Like if I'm doing this thing, I'm gonna go push that thing and exhaust it and make sure that I tried everything within that thing that I'm working on and seeing which ones work best, because it's all about an experiment. It's not about like, this is not a big fucking, it's just about experimenting with the thing that you're working on and not getting too caught up in the details, the minutiae, but just try things within that thing that you're working on, and with enough attempts with different styles, different things, different approaches to it, then you start getting a sense of like what works best for you, and then what works best in different scenarios, context, situations. But you have to try a lot. That's the best thing I'd say. Someone's like, know what you're working on, why you're working on it, but try a lot of things on it. Don't just get one or two things and then think that it's enough. Like, you know, like the real old school, like that's, even though that I don't like the pickup at its own place in a sense, but the old school, the good thing about old school pickup communities in forums is like they weren't like just talking about it. They went out, tried it 1,000 times, and then came back and then told you what happened. You know, it's like, yeah, like those people at least were like trying stuff. Okay, I went out, I tried this one End of God 1,000 times, and this happened, and I learned this, and I could have done this better, or this works better for me in this time, whatever, you know. And a lot of people are just like, yeah, it's just not about the process. I think that's the biggest problem. It's always about the outcome for most people. It's never about the process, and they're lost in the outcome. And if you look at most people that are successful at anything, they're successful because they're not about the outcome. They're about the process of the thing they're doing.
Yeah.
Of learning the process.
Actually, that reminds me of a quote that I read in the book today of Stoicism. It says that, yeah, you shouldn't focus on, don't remember specifically the quote, but the general idea was you shouldn't focus, if you want to focus on the result of your success, you will end up like unhappy or like sometimes. But if you just focus on you doing the best that you can do, like always focus on achieving as much as is possible for you, like every time, and then you will always be happy. Because if you're doing the best that you can in everything, then in that way you will always have some happiness. But yeah, that was interesting. So I think you made some really, really interesting points about people not taking action, and people who kind of, in these kind of Facebook groups nowadays, you see loads of people just giving advice when they don't really know what to do, and they're just they're telling people what to do. And from what I've seen from people who actually go out, one of the biggest problems is like the whole approach anxiety and anxiety in general. And from my experience over these last couple of days, I feel like all of the anxiety is created within the mind. There's emotions attached to it, emotions that come, but the thought comes first of like whatever. And anytime I've been in presence, fear and anxiety have not been close to me. So like, I understand how staying in presence can keep you in that place where anxiety is not a thing. But I'm feeling like maybe it's just a thought, maybe it's just a belief that I have. But when I go back into the other world, then when I do like meet a girl, do an approach, what's to stop the fear and anxiety kicking back in, like instead of staying in presence?
Well, not. So, I think this is a huge thing that like now I can really openly talk about this because it's so ridiculous. So this idea of approach anxiety and fear, this came from marketing, from coaches that wanted to sell, and they created this thing called approach anxiety. And then this thing called approach anxiety became a thing that everyone spoke about, and it became a belief of everybody, and then became a self-fulfilling prophecy for everybody. And then everyone is like, yeah, I have approach anxiety too. And everyone just has approach anxiety, and everyone is like telling each other about and reinforcing each other's approach anxiety, and everyone is like, oh yeah, it's so hard because of the approach anxiety. And it creates just a collective ego of pickup guys, all with approach anxiety. What I have to say about that is, it doesn't exist. Yeah, it seems like it does, but it's just a sensation. It isn't approach anxiety. That doesn't exist. It's just a label to a sensation, and you don't remove the sensations. You cannot directly go and be like, get the fuck out of it. Like, you don't deal with emotions directly, try to remove them. You just accept them. You just, like, the best way to deal with emotions is remain in presence and just let them be, and they will go away. And just accept them, like, just accept. If you can't just be in presence and let them go away, what I would say is, like, try to love those sensations. Try to, like, don't use your mind to kind of, like, look at it, because a lot of people just, like, they're so stuck here that they start thinking about the approach anxiety. Like, just feel into it. Just feel how it feels. And just don't try to fight it. Whatever resists persists, correct? So just realize it's just a illusory, temporary sensation in your body. That's it. It isn't a fucking problem. When you make it a problem, you create a narrative in the mind, then it creates a self-fulfilling prophecy that is a problem. You always tell yourself it's a problem, it's a problem. The more you tell yourself it's a problem, the more you prove to yourself that it's a problem. And so it's just deleting the fucking narrative about the problem, and then just seeing what it is there, just a sensation. And if you just start processing those sensations, eventually you just don't feel that shit anymore. Because you stop creating narratives around sensations. You just start seeing it as just what it is, a feeling.
Yeah, I think that was some good advice. I think for sure a lot of people will still have that belief about approach anxiety, but then if they can just witness it as just a sensation and let it pass,
Stop
labeling
this
it. Yeah.
Narrative that's going on in their mind. Yeah. Because there is, like, definitely a deep narrative a lot of guys have, like, about approach anxiety that in their mind. So just stop feeding those thoughts. Just stop, entertaining those thoughts about approach anxiety, and you'll see that it's all happening inside your head.
Is this all real? Or is it just happening inside my head?
Of course it's happening inside your head, Harry. Why should that mean that it's not real?
Really?
Well, on a certain level, we kind of figured that everything is, so we can use that same approach to pretty much every problem. It's like, it's like, okay, we are the ones who create our own problems. Let's just resolve our own problems, and then what?
Let's just stop seeing them as problems, because the problem that you have is that you see it as a problem. That's the real problem. And then because you see it as a problem, you try to fight the problem. But if you just let the thing be there, it will go away. and it's not a problem. But the more you make it a problem, the more real it seems. The problem seems.
So it's just a matter of interpretation. Like you interpret it as a positive thing, it could boost you, you know. And it's like,
Yeah. It's like imagine like this is a great example. Is like imagine since you were a child, your mom is like, you're anxious. You're the shit. She's like, yay, I'm anxious. Like the child's like, hey, I'm anxious. Like you would fucking see a girl feel anxious, like, great, I feel great. Let's do this approach. I feel anxious, amazing. Yeah, it just really comes down to like, it's even the idea what is anxious. Like it's hard to like, it's just another label. Like the mind loves to label things, and it labels the sensations as well. So it creates all kinds of meanings for them that they don't have. And so, just like whatever you were conditioned, your mind conditioned to label whatever sensations you have, that's the way you're gonna perceive the sensations. But like I say, if you saw all those sensations as like a good example from Eckhart Tolle is not in his book, but he said is like whatever comes up in the moment, in the present moment, just accept it as as like you had chosen it to appear, and you no longer have problems, because the problem is whenever something appears, you think it's not supposed to appear, and you try to fight it, and that creates a problem. Yeah.
okay. Yeah, that's some good advice. We'll definitely take that. Eckhart Tolle. So yeah, you've been reading this book. I'm curious because I want to read the book next. You have any other comments about that book, the one you're reading now, or something specific?
No, I mean it's a lot of things about the ego, and talks about parenting, some interesting stuff. But yeah, I guess you have to read it about like different ways the ego manifests, and the ego only can survive through identification, and it creates all kinds of distorted identifications, and it's interesting to see the different ways that it manifests. But nothing really that comes up right now. But actually, I wanted to ask you some things about today. So it's interesting that you said just today, you said, before I thought, you said something like, I saw that there were some patterns. And now you realize that everything is pattern, all our patterns.
Well,
And so I would like to know what things today that made you realize that all are patterns, and that before you weren't like saying everything is a pattern, but what kind of realizations happened today that made you come to that conclusion or realization? Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't one specific thing, but it was just kind of a couple of things overall where, like, I looked at it from the perspective of it was a situation that someone else was going through, and then I looked at it from this perspective of like, okay, if my previous self was in that situation, would I have acted any differently? And then I thought I would have, but then when I see kind of what kind of upbringing that person had, what background they have, and it's like the cycle that they went through in their life makes complete sense for them. And then it's like, that's a cycle, that's a pattern. And then it's like, for me, it was also a pattern of where I went through, because up until you mentioned the thing about the blue, me having some blue within me from the spiral dynamics, it was something that I'd never even considered. Like, I just assumed that it was completely gone from me. But then when I looked at it from a different perspective, I was like, of course I do still. Looking at those, it was very obvious. And then the connection that I made was the behaviors the behavior patterns that I was like demonstrating, and then linking them to spiral dynamics stages, which was something that I never did before. I kind of just viewed spiral dynamics as a separate thing and behavior patterns as a separate thing. But then when I started to make those connections, I started to make those connections everywhere. Then I was like, oh wait, like this, like I understood spiral dynamics as a thing that evolves human consciousness through the places, but I never thought to like apply it beyond my immediate life. Like I looked at it in such a wider concept, and it was like, okay, wow, seeing the patterns that have emerged from certain people, and it's so obvious what they're going through right now, like people in my family, for example, and just other people that I know. And then, yeah, you said something interesting as well today, which kind of triggered a little thought. But something about the ego not being able to survive once you're aware of the ego. Was it something like that? It's like
It doesn't come in so much gross ways, I guess.
yeah, once you're aware of the ego, it's kind of comes in a little bit more of a subtle way. So there's a couple of things that you pointed out that where the ego was still coming in, and then I kind of assumed that because I was in presence, the ego wouldn't come in, but then the ego still, it's like the cycle has stopped, but it's trying a smaller way, it's trying a different way. And yeah, maybe the bigger connection that I made was the connection between understanding how computer systems work and how they operate and how code operates, and how what I've seen in terms of my own patterns and how similar it is. It's like if I was to write a piece of code to explain the 30 years of my life, it would be possible through computer code based on the actions I've taken, which is crazy. It's like the action I felt like I've been making these decisions, been like individual, doing this, doing that, but it's all been programmed in this like thing over here. And then it's like, that's fucking crazy to me when I thought about that. I was like, this whole time I felt like I've had control of this thing and I'm doing it, but then I'm running on these patterns, and then everyone's running on these patterns. And then that was just like mind blowing to me when I made that connection between the computer codes and the mind.
Mm.
But yeah.
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 That's good, yeah.
It was, yeah.
That's great that you realize that. Most people don't.
Well, I mean, yeah. Maybe I didn't answer your question. I just
Yeah,
realized.
you didn't.
I just realized because, like, initially, I just thought that there was certain behavior patterns. Like, I just thought that certain things were patterns. You know, I didn't see like the whole thing was like a pattern, because when I looked at my whole life, I was like, wait, everything can be written into some kind of pattern. I was following some kind of thread, like some kind of fucking repeating some cycles until the cycles were done, like following along the scope of the consciousness evolution of spiral dynamics, and just like the whole thing was just me just going through certain patterns. And still, when I think about unconscious moments that I have, all of the unconscious moments are just me repeating something that I've done before, because it's easy for the mind to just keep repeating that. So yeah, that was just mind blowing when I saw like it's not just certain patterns that you have, it's like the whole thing is patterns, and you can kind of reconfigure it to your own liking if you know how to do that.
Okay, so what were the patterns that... So yesterday you didn't realize that, did you?
I mean, not fully, I would say. No.
Okay, so what kind of patterns and situations today? You already mentioned the one that I called out, the egos being subtle. Or what else that did you... Like, was that enough thing to realize that, or were anything else?
No, it's mostly about the link between the computer code that I was thinking about, and how my 30 years of life like I felt as though it was an individual's choice. You know, I didn't. At no point did I feel like I was doing anything like remotely like a pattern. I felt like I was just making choices, doing things, and doing it because I wanted to.
Mm.
And it's like
Yeah.
that was the thing where it's like, oh no, everything was because of something in the past, and that something in the past wasn't resolved, so it just kept looping over. So it's kind of like the code looping until the condition is met. You just keep on going, and then it's like, whoa, everything. Yeah.
Okay, so nothing more patterns today. What kind of patterns today more? You don't remember anything more?
Any what? What do you mean?
In our walk and maybe before?
Oh, I see what you're hinting at. I was like, what the fuck is he trying to talk about? So subtle there. In our walk.
Yeah, you were so low as well with the push the abs.
I was like, what is he talking about? Oh yeah, there was one more pattern. Now that you mention it. Dickhead.
This is great.
Yeah, there was one more pattern. Like, so yeah, we were walking. We were going for a walk, and then like it was getting dark, getting towards the end. So we just like kind of stopped, and then I was like, we were looking at each other, and I was looking at you, you looking at me, and then I don't know what happened, but I kind of said to you like, oh, do you think we should go back? Or you said, do you think we should go back or something? Then like you asked and I asked, and I was asking for permission to like go back, and you were like, you lead. So this is a pattern that's kind of reoccurred throughout my life. Well, not throughout my life, just mainly when hanging out with you for some reason, where it's like you're the one who's always leading the situations. So especially with girls.
Nobody else?
No, there's a few other people for sure, but mainly I can think of with you. But yeah, you are mainly the guy who's leading the situation, especially when we're out talking to girls. So it's kind of a reoccurring pattern. So it was one that you like made the effort to like, hey, we're gonna break that today. You lead. So
Are you saying that? Are you not playing that role in any other areas of your life?
playing what role?
The follower.
Yeah, sure. So it's like exactly. It's like in this situation, it's like just because that happens in this area doesn't mean it's isolated. It's like it's the way I link it to like the computer code now is like we have like a role, you know, in the computer system. In order for you to access what you need to on the computer system, I will assign you a role, and the role will have all your access in it. So for example, in this situation, I was assigned the follower role, and what that means is like I have the follower across all domains. So it doesn't matter about like what domain you're in, it's the follower. You don't get the leader role unless you're the leader, but when you have the leader role, you have that across all domains. So that's how I made the link between